Yeah. Analytics off the chain, other channels not the same. Jake and Kyle, you know the name. Headliner Nation, we running the game. I'm a headliner.
What is going on, Headliner Nation? Welcome back to the Fantasy Headliners. Kyle here with our tight end matchup breakdown of the week, talking about our start and sit analysis. Hopefully everybody's doing well out there today. Let's go ahead and take a look at our week 6 accuracy report before we talk about anything else, and our highest percentage at the tight end position in a while. This past week we came in at 82% of our calls correct, ladies and gentlemen. Normally I tell you, hey, we're shooting for that 70 mark. I went above and beyond, all the way up to 82% this past week. Was a really good week for us at the tight end position. Hopefully that analysis helped you out and got you a win this week. But before we start the analysis at the position, we also got to talk about our October giveaway. Everything you see here on the screen could be yours if you're chosen, but the only way you can even have a chance is to either download the PrizePicks app or head over to their website, create a free account with code word headliners, and then deposit a minimum of $20. Now, PrizePicks is going to match your deposit all the way up to $100. So, hey, that's a win right there. But on top of it, you're going to be entered for this sweet giveaway. Everything that you see here at the bottom of the screen could end up being yours if you're chosen for the October giveaway. So make sure you do that before it is too late. But ladies and gentlemen, lots of teams on buys this week. We've got 6 teams on a buy, which means more than ever, we need to make sure that we nail our analysis this week. So let's jump into it and talk about Thursday Night Football. Our Thursday night matchup is going to bring Denver at Cleveland and Noah Fant. We're going to go back to him as another start this week. He is coming off his best game of the season last week, so it's really good to see that even though there's been inconsistencies with him, it's good to see him taking such a huge step forward this past week. The one thing I'm keeping an eye on is Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah from the Cleveland Browns. That is a guy that can handle any linebacker in the league in a coverage type of position, because of just how excellent he is as an athlete and in coverage. So if JOK is out for some reason, this could really help move Noah Fant towards a big game this week. So I'm going to put him as a start right now. I know JOK has been banged up. We'll keep an eye on that and see what happens the rest of the week. For Cleveland, I'm not going to be able to start any of these guys in the coming week. If Chubb isn't back and the offensive line continues to be beat up, then I think that they may need to have their tight ends do some extra blocking this week. And like we talked about in the wide receiver video, we've got Jarvis Landry back this week. Odell Beckham Jr. is somewhat healthy, had to leave the game for a little bit. Donovan Peoples-Jones is coming off a big game. They still have Rashard Higgins, so they have more than enough guys at the wide receiver position and Demetric Felton at the running back position to really have enough pass catchers that they don't need to rely on these tight ends. So I expect to see Austin Hooper out there quite a bit, and I expect to see a lot of blocking. Washington at Green Bay this week. Ricky Seals-Jones made the correct call on him last week, and we're going to go back to him as another start this week. Green Bay is allowing just over 13 fantasy points per game to opposing tight ends right now, and the addition of Jalen Smith does help them in coverage, right? That's something that Jalen Smith can do well. I mean, he can get across the field. You can say what you want about the guy. I mean, Cowboys fans don't love him. There's other people who have been critical of him, but he is a guy that isn't necessarily great in coverage, but he's great at tracking down players. He's fast. He's got a great burst of speed. He can get after people. So with Ricky Seals-Jones this week, having Jalen Smith at the linebacker position for Green Bay is going to help limit potentially some of those big plays for Ricky Seals-Jones. Still going to go with him as a start, but I think it could end up being based around the touchdown. If he gets a touchdown, we should be golden. If he doesn't, we're probably going to be cutting it pretty close. And for the Green Bay Packers, the tight end position continues to do nothing from them. Huge fall from grace for Robert Tonyan, but he is not an option anymore. KC at Tennessee. This is a pretty easy analysis. Travis Kelce, 100%, the undisputed number one. When you look at the numbers, there's no one that you'd rather have at the position than Travis Kelce, even though the Kansas City Chiefs had some inconsistencies with their performance so far this season. And for the Tennessee tie-in, Anthony Firkser, Jeff Swaim, both of them are sits. And A.J. Brown is back. Julio Jones is back. And again, this is a team that is based around the run and King Henry. Atlanta at Miami, and for those of you that were sweating the draft pick of Kyle Pitts for the first few weeks, finally 2 weeks ago before the bye, he has an insane game, and I expect them to continue to work him into the game plan. Like I've told all of you in these videos, we're not giving up on Kyle Pitts. The inconsistencies will be there. There will be great performances. There will be bad performances. But we know that he is getting targets. And at the tight end position, there's not too many guys that are getting focused on more than Kyle Pitts right now. So we are continue to list him as a start. He is still the number 2 target on this team. For Miami, Mike Gesicki, I was really worried about him if Tua was going to come back and be the starter, because Tua didn't really utilize him to start the season. He wasn't looking his way. Now, Jacoby Brissett comes in a couple of weeks ago, makes Mike Gesicki a top 3 tight end for a few weeks, and then all of a sudden Tua's back, and it's fine. It's absolutely fine. Mike Gesicki last week, a huge week, 8 receptions on 9 targets for 115 yards. Part of it has to be at this point, no Will Fuller and no Devontae Parker. So really it's kind of a, hey, there's no one else. So when Devontae Parker were to come back, then maybe we have to reanalyze it a little bit and see what happens. But hopefully this time as the number 2 target on the team is going to allow him to gel with Tua. And then when these guys do come back, it doesn't matter. He'll still go to Gesicki. New York Jets at New England, and for the Jets, not doing anything. Ryan Griffin, Tyler Kroft, nothing. They haven't done anything all year. Not starting him this week, even with all the buys. Not even considering it. For the New England Patriots, Hunter Henry. Let's go, baby. Hunter Henry looking good. He's looking like the touchdown threat that he was while he was in Los Angeles. He has a touchdown in 3 straight games, and he's the tight end 9 over the last 3 weeks. I've been kind of beating this drum for a few weeks now, telling you to get ready and grab Hunter Henry. So far, he's worked out. And I'm also going to go with Jonnu Smith this week because the New York Jets, as I mentioned in my wide receiver video, they allow the 3rd fewest fantasy points per game to opposing wide receivers. So I'm worried about the wide receiver position this week. But for the tight ends, they do allow over 16 fantasy points per game to tight ends. So Jonnu Smith, I'm going to bet on him to potentially find the end zone this week and be a start for us as well. Carolina at the New York Giants, Ian Thomas, Tommy Tremble. Both of these guys, Thomas seen a few targets here and there. Tommy Tremble has seen a few targets in the red zone. It's not enough right now, though. Even with the injury to Christian McCaffrey and Robbie Anderson not performing that well, it's just not enough for me to bank on either of these guys right now. So it's going to be a no for me to continue that trend with the Carolina Panthers. And for the New York Giants, we're done with Evan Ingram right now. Even with all the injuries, the guy isn't even getting the targets, right? Last year, you could argue bad year for Evan Ingram, but he got the targets. And if the targets were to come back, there was still a potential that we could play him on certain weeks if we had. And you would like to see that. But the targets aren't even there anymore for Evan Ingram. He's not doing anything. Therefore, no longer going to be a start for us. Cincinnati at Baltimore, and CJ, who's your mama? He's going to be a start for us this week. Baltimore has allowed the 3rd most fantasy points per game to opposing tight end. And I'm going to be betting on CJ, who's your mama, this week to find the end zone, especially because the matchup can be so tough for the wide receiver position this week. On the outside, Jamar Chase and T. Higgins could be absolutely limited because of how well the cornerbacks play, including the outstanding play of Marlon Humphrey this year. Tyler Boyd has a much better matchup in the slot, but that could open up some opportunity for CJ Uzomah underneath, especially considering the fact if they've got the corners locked down and you've got Boyd over the middle, he's going to be pulling guys down the field. Joe Mixon, big game last week in the passing game, so Baltimore is going to have to be looking at that as well. Because of all that, CJ, who's your mama, he could just slip out and he could get a few targets with some pretty decent gains. So we're going to go back to him this week as a start. And then for the Baltimore Ravens, I mean, Mark Andrews is scorching hot right now. He is the overall tight end 1 since week 3. We're going to continue to play him and continue to get some fabulous fantasy points from his production. Philadelphia at Las Vegas, and for the Philadelphia Eagles, Dallas Goedert. This is going to be my Manscaped must-watch matchup of the week. Why? Why wouldn't you? With Dallas Goedert and no more Zach Ertz, and now we've got Darren Waller in this matchup. Don't forget our friends over at Manscaped are sponsoring us here again this season. So if you're going to head over to Manscaped and order yourself some goodies, make sure that you use code word headliners at checkout for 20% off your entire order and free shipping. Again, thanks to Manscaped for sponsoring us again this year. Make sure you head over there, get yourself some goods, and use our code while you're doing it. Now, for the Philadelphia Eagles, the only guy that I trust in this offense right now is Dallas Goedert. So, what is it that we are going to see from him? And this was one of the reasons this is my must-watch matchup of the week, because I want to see what they do with Dallas Goedert. Now, prior to the trade of Zach Ertz was the receiving threat. He was the guy running the most routes at the tight end position. Zach Ertz was running a route 93% of their passing plays. Dallas Goedert was floating more around that 72%. So what they were doing with Dallas Goedert is they were using him on the line to block more. Ertz was seeing a much larger volume, Goedert was blocking more, and he was more of the red zone threat. Now, no more Zach Ertz. What is that going to mean? Are we automatically going to see Dallas Goedert bump up to being that type of a tight end that's running over 90% of his routes on passing plays? Or are we going to see him continue to stay kind of in the same arena that he has been because Philadelphia wants to utilize him on the line and help block a little bit more? That's going to be a really big thing to watch this week. Now, because of no more Zach Ertz, this week I'm 100% going with Dallas Goedert as a start. I might keep him a little bit lower on the rankings, but he's going to be a top 12 tight end for me, and I like the matchup for him this week. Again, as we talked about in the wide receiver video, this could be a tough matchup for the wide receivers. Jalen Hurts could have to throw to Dallas Goedert a lot more. One thing to keep in mind, he hasn't been officially cleared to come back from COVID protocols yet. We just need to monitor that. And then, of course, for Las Vegas, Darren Waller, he's had his up and downs this season. Not nearly as consistent as he was last year. He's still a top threat at the position, though, and he's still a guy that you're starting on a weekly basis. Detroit at the LA Rams, and for TJ Hockenson, thank God we got back to utilizing him last week. 11 targets last week, and the ceiling is going to be lower for me this week just because if they split TJ Hockenson out wide at all, there's a good chance he could see some Jalen Ramsey coverage this week. Not a whole lot, and I don't expect Jalen Ramsey to shadow him, but I do expect the LA Rams to say, hey, TJ Hockenson is probably their best receiving threat, so if we put Jalen Ramsey on him at some point, take that away, that's really going to help us in keeping Detroit minimizing their plays, right? Minimizing those high upside plays that they could potentially have. So because of that, TJ Hockenson is going to be a little bit lower for me, but there's nobody on this team that I trust at this point outside of TJ Hockenson, and even then, he's kind of burned us over the last several weeks up until last week. Hopefully that means he's getting healthy again. Hopefully that means they're not utilizing him to block as much. We'll see what happens against the Rams, though, especially with that tough pass rush. And then for Tyler Higbee, he's not getting as many big plays, right? I mean, he's getting a decent amount of targets, but he's not averaging those big plays like we've seen from him in the past. And that's really keeping his ceiling lower and keeping him away from 8 fantasy points per game, which we would need for him to be a hit. So because of that, I'm going to move away for a little bit and see if they can start getting him some bigger plays. Besides, I think this game is going to be all about the wide receivers and Stafford going balls deep. Houston at Arizona, and this would be an excellent matchup for Zach Ertz if he wasn't in his first game with Arizona. So for the Houston Texans, Pharaoh Brown, Jordan Akins are both going to be sits for me. Akins did get 6 targets last week, which was nice to see. I really wish they'd give him 6 targets every week, because if they did, he would become a fantasy viable tight end. They just aren't giving him that on a weekly basis. For Arizona, I would love to list Zach Ertz as a start this week. But again, his first game with the team, tons of weapons to use, could end up being a blowout. All of those factors lead me to believe that Zach Ertz just isn't the guy that I would want this week. Now, Houston is giving up more points at the tight end position than almost any other team, any other defense in the NFL. So it would be a great option. But again, potential blowout, tons of wide receiver weapons, first game with the team, still learning the playbook, all of those things. I'm going to take just a step back on Zach Ertz this week. Now, if you're in a bind and there's nobody for you to grab and you really are having issues, then maybe you could utilize Zach Ertz this week, especially if it would mean, oh, do you have to drop somebody to pick up a tight end? Like, if you were to do something like that, then maybe I still would consider throwing Ertz in there, keeping your fingers crossed, and just hoping for the best. Chicago at Tampa Bay, and for Cole Kmet, he's a guy I want to get on board with. They're just not utilizing him, and another one of the reasons why Matt Nagy is the worst head coach in the NFL. Not the worst. Close, though. For Tampa Bay, Rob Gronkowski, still not expecting him back this week, and Chicago only allows 8 fantasy points per game to the tight end position. So continue to monitor it. Obviously, if Gronk were to come back, we'll reevaluate at that point and see if we're starting Gronk back in his first game from injury. If not, O.J. Howard and Cameron Brate, they're going to end up being sits for me. Nolans at Seattle, and for New Orleans, I really looked at this one closely for a while. I would really like to potentially start Juwan Johnson this week, especially with just the way the wide receivers have played. This matchup is a little confusing for me, okay? Because I could see this going one of two ways, where it is one of those games where New Orleans on the road at Seattle, from that game last week, trying to bring that energy over, they just don't get it done, right? I could also see these two teams trying to go absolutely ham on each other. Geno Smith taking a step forward for the Seattle Seahawks. Jameis Winston having a good game. I could really see this game going either way. So for me personally, I'm playing it safe. Juwan Johnson, Adam Troutman, they haven't really been consistent producers, so I'm going to list them as sits this week. And for Seattle, I am going to go with Will Dissly. He only had 2 targets last week, but he did score in the red zone, which was good. And I'm thinking that we see Geno Smith look his way a little bit more this week in order to kind of establish the passing game early on. Some good high upside, high percentage completion throws to Gerald Everett and potentially Will Dissly, both of these guys, and see what happens. Now, Dissly is my kind of my red zone guy. I think he ends up being the guy this week. You could end up going with Everett too. I think his upside might be a little bit higher, but I also think his floor is a lot lower as well. So, are you trusting Will Dissly this week? Probably not. But if you're in a bind and you absolutely need anybody, he is one guy I'm looking at this week to potentially be a sneaky under-the-radar start. Ladies and gentlemen, there you have it, my tight end analysis for all the matchups in Week 7 of the NFL season. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button. Become a part of Headliner Nation today. Make sure you leave a comment down below. Who's a tight end that you're playing this week, not playing this week, you're worried about, questions about? Let me know in the comments. And then make sure that you also hit that like button if you appreciate the content that we're pouring out for you here at the Fantasy Headliners. Ladies and gentlemen, stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll catch you all in the next episode of the Fantasy Headliners.